Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 61. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
My name's David Parish. I represent the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery as a volunteer on the military enquiry desk.
The organisation has an object in the exhibition. What is that object?
The object is a carved wooden horse. It was given to the Northamptonshire Yeomanry in 1945 in Germany. It was actually made by a German prisoner of war for a person in the regiment during the end of the war while they were stationed in Germany.
Why do you think it was made for a particular person?
It was made for a particular person, I think, as a thank you for being looked after. The soldier in question, perhaps he helped the German prisoner in a difficult time that period.
How were Northamptonshire soldiers in Germany overseeing prisoners of war?
We go back to, obviously, the regiment, the Northamptonshire Yeomanry. It landed in Normandy in June 1944. There were two regiments, the 1st Yeomanry and the 2nd Yeomanry, and they fought in the fierce tank battles in Normandy to break out into Holland and Germany. The 2nd Regiment, after 8 weeks of fighting, had to be disbanded. They'd lost so many men and tanks, and it couldn't be replaced. And so a lot of these soldiers was absorbed into the 1st Regiment and other different units. The 1st Regiment carried on, and it fought its way all the way through into Belgium, Holland, and then eventually in 1945 made its way into Germany, and it was part of the occupation force that was trying to sort out the chaos that was left at the end of the war.
How did this gift come to be part of the museum?
Right, the soldier in question was a long-serving member of the regiment by the name of Regimental Sergeant Major Jelley. He'd been in the yeomanry since 1920s. He actually enlisted in the Royal Artillery underage in 1916-17, and he eventually ended up as the longest serving member of the Territorial Army in the country. He'd served something like 51 years when he actually was put into retirement in the late 60s. His job at the time was as the Regimental Sergeant Major. He was looking after the area and the troops under his command. When the regiment came back to England, he would have brought this back with him. It stayed with the regiment in the regimental archives until such times as the regiment came to its end, as no longer needed by the army. It then eventually ended up in the Regimental Museum in the archives that was given to the museum at Abington Park.
So RSM Jelley then, because of the length of his service, was he something of a poster boy for the British forces?
Not for the British forces in such, but for the regiment, he was a very well-known figure within the regiment.
And isn't a regimental sergeant major, isn't that about as high as you can go as a non-commissioned officer?
It's the highest rank you can go without being commissioned as an officer, yes, yeah.
So he'd risen from the ranks in that case?
He'd risen from the ranks of trooper when he joined in the early 20s, and then he made his way through in 1940 as regimental sergeant major, and he went to Normandy with the regiment.
And fought with the men?
Yes, he fought right through into Germany.
And then he had this guarding responsibility with prisoners of war. Was it commonplace for prisoners of war to make gifts and hand gifts to perhaps those who were guarding them?
It's quite possibly it was. I mean, I like to think it was done as a thank you for kindness shown perhaps to a German prisoner at that particular time, when obviously the Germans or anybody with a German accent was way out of favour.
Do we know anything at all about the person who made the horse?
Nothing at all. There's nothing on record we could find who made it for the regiment. He was either a skilled man or a woodworker or that type of thing. Forestry man. He was somebody that could carve something out of a piece of wood.
Dave, you're a military historian. This item by itself is simply a piece of carved wood, and yet the person it was given to is of Northamptonshire. What do you think RSM Jelley says about Northamptonshire in terms of who he represented, by which I mean king and country, but what does it also say about Northamptonshire?
To me, the object it's a memento of the regiment. It's a memento of what the regiment stands for. The majority of the soldiers that served early in the regiment were local people from Northamptonshire. The officers would have been local landowners or earls of the area. The Spencer family was, in the early part of the Yeomanry's history, represent it. A lot of the soldiers would be farmers and farm labourers, used to horses, because early on in its period of life, the regiment was horse-mounted, only going into tanks in the 30s and the 40s. It represents the soldiers that served in the territorial army, like citizens that served part-time and then in wartime, became members of the army and went out to defend the country and its values. I think this is something that gets lost in history, that a lot of the soldiers were really just ordinary citizens that came to the country's defence, and the territorial army has always been there. It's still there today. It's still there as your army reserve. And when you look at some of the early lists of people, they come from the towns and villages and Northampton, Northamptonshire to make up the regiment.
Dave, do you have any connection to the armed forces yourself?
Yes, I do actually. My grandfather, he served in the Northamptonshire Yeomanry in the First World War when it was a mounted regiment on horseback. He fought all the way through France and he ended his war in 1918 in Italy. And he said one of the saddest things was having to unsaddle his horse and tie it and leave it in Italy. He rejoined the Yeomanry in the 20s and he served with RSM Jelley until he retired in the mid-30s. I followed him into the local territorial unit or the Army Reserve unit that's stationed at Clare Street, 118 Recovery Company, and I served with them right the way through till 96 when I retired from it. So I'd done approximately 29 years with them, and my son, he's actually still serving with that unit. So we have got a territorial connection within the
And
family.
You're directly connected, in terms of serving, to RSM Jelley?
It would be. He would have served in the same building with my grandfather than that I served in. Yes.
And your grandfather was mounted because he was on horseback?
He was a mount. He fought his war on horseback. And obviously RSM Jelley's war was fought as an armoured regiment in tanks.
And we're talking about an object which is of a horse?
That actual object represents the emblem, the cap badge of the Yeomanry. It's the white horse, so it's full circle.
So the prisoner of war that made it had a very keen eye for the badge of the regiment.
He would have looked at the cap badge that the soldiers were wearing, or RSM Jelley's cap badge, and he would have used that as a guide to the present that he was making.
Which would have made it a very personal
gift
to RSM Jelley. Yes. Dave, it's good to know that the present is marked here in Northamptonshire, and indeed the past of Northamptonshire soldiers are remembered, either in terms of architecture or even, as you've just said, in the street names. Barrack Road. Here we have a gift from an unknown prisoner of war. Thank you for telling me about this very special gift which is part of the exhibition.
Pleasure to do it.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.